The sound of shattering glass echoed through our living room as my suitcase hit the front walkway. Rain soaked through my clothes as I stood there, stunned, watching my husband of 12 years slam our front door. The home I had helped pay for. The life I had built. "Get out and don't come back," were his final words. Little did he know, the letter I'd received that morning would change everything. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. My name is Olivia Mercer, and at 38, I never imagined I'd be standing in the pouring rain, locked, out of my own home by the man who had once promised to love me forever. The cruel irony? Just hours earlier, I'd received news that would have solved all of Ryan's problems, the very problems that had triggered his explosive rage. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the screen still showing the email that had arrived that morning. "We are pleased to inform you that the estate of Eleanor Blackwood has been settled. As sole beneficiary, you are entitled to the sum of $3.4 million, plus property assets valued at approximately $1.7 million. Aunt Eleanor, my mother's eccentric, older sister who had disappeared from our lives decades ago, had remembered me after all. The Aunt Ryan had always dismissed as that crazy old lady who probably died broke. The aunt who, according to Ryan, had been a waste of time to visit during her final days. Thunder rumbled overhead as I stood on the sidewalk, rain streaming down my face, mixing with tears I refused to acknowledge. A neighbor's curtain twitched. Mrs. Caldwell, no doubt, witnessing my humiliation. I gathered what dignity I could and dragged my hastily packed suitcase toward my car. Ryan's rage had been building for weeks. The tech startup where he worked as VP of development had been struggling. Investors were pulling out, layoffs were imminent, and the stress had transformed him. The man who once brought me coffee in bed and surprised me with weekend getaways had become a stranger, irritable, distant, and increasingly volatile. Tonight had been the breaking point. I'd suggested we might need to consider selling our house if things got worse. Maybe downsizing temporarily wouldn't be the worst thing, I'd said, trying to be practical. We could rebuild. The look in his eyes had shifted from frustration to something darker. Downsizing? Are you kidding me? This is what I get for marrying someone with no ambition? Someone who gives up at the first sign of trouble? I'd tried to explain that I wasn't giving up. I was being realistic. But Ryan wasn't listening anymore. Years of resentment came pouring out. How my career as a children's book illustrator was just a hobby. How I'd never truly contributed to our lifestyle. How his family had been right about me all along. When I finally found my voice and suggested that perhaps we needed some time apart, something in him snapped. The vase. A wedding. Gift from his mother flew across the room. Then came the framed photo of our honeymoon. With each crash, I saw the truth of our marriage shattering before my eyes. "If you want out, then get out," he had shouted, storming upstairs. He returned minutes later with a suitcase, haphazardly filled with some of my clothes. Before I could process what was happening, he was pushing me toward the door, my belongings following after me. Now, sitting in my car with the heater running, I scrolled through my contacts. Who could I call? My best friend Zoe was out of town. My younger sister Mia lived in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates. My parents had retired to Arizona years ago. I had always been the one others leaned on, the reliable one with the stable, marriage, and the beautiful home. How could I admit that it had all been an illusion? I started driving aimlessly, wipers fighting against the downpour, until I found myself in the parking lot of the Harbor View Hotel. It was far from luxurious, but it was clean and anonymous. Perfect for someone whose life had just imploded. The young woman at the reception desk barely looked up as I checked in, for which I was grateful. I didn't want to explain my rain-soaked appearance or the mascara streaks I could feel on my cheeks. I just wanted a hot shower and a moment to think. Room 317 was small but clean. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. My marriage was over. The signs had been there for years. Ryan's controlling behavior, his dismissal of my career, his increasingly frequent outbursts, but I had chosen not to see them. I reached for my phone again, opening the email about Aunt Eleanor's inheritance. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I was not destitute. I was not helpless. In fact, I now had more financial security than Ryan could dream of. Aunt Eleanor had been an enigma in our family. After a bitter falling out with my mother, decades ago she had built a successful interior design business in Europe. When she was diagnosed with terminal cancer 6 months ago, I was the only family member who flew to Switzerland to be with her. Not out of expectation of inheritance. I hadn't even known she had money, but because no one should die alone. We'd spent 3 weeks together, reconnecting as she shared stories of her adventurous life. "Never let anyone dim your light, Olivia," she had told me, her voice weak but her eyes still fierce. I stayed away from the family because they wanted me to be smaller, quieter, more conventional. Don't make my mistake. Don't waste years trying to please people who can't see your worth. I had nodded, listening but not truly hearing. Now, her words echoed in my mind with new significance. A notification on my phone broke through my thoughts. 3 missed calls from Ryan and a text. "I'm sorry. Come home. We can talk about this." I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the reply button. The old Olivia would have gone back. The old Olivia would have accepted his apology, cleaned up the broken glass, and tried harder to be what he wanted. But sitting in that anonymous hotel room, soaked to the skin and emotionally raw, I realized I wasn't that person anymore. Aunt Eleanor's final gift wasn't just financial freedom. It was the courage to finally see the truth. I placed the phone on the nightstand without replying and walked to the bathroom. As steam filled the small space, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Beneath the smeared makeup and damp hair, I saw something I hadn't noticed in years. A spark of determination, of possibility. Ryan had kicked me out thinking I had nowhere to go, no resources of my own. He had never bothered to understand my relationship with Aunt Eleanor, or the promise I had made to her as she lay dying. To live boldly, on my own terms. As I stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the night's trauma, I made a decision. Ryan had no idea what was coming next, and for the first time in 12 years neither did I, but I was finally ready to find out. I woke the next morning disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar ceiling and the muffled sounds of housekeeping in the hallway. Then it all came rushing back: Ryan's rage, the suitcase on the sidewalk, the inheritance. For a moment I pulled the blanket over my head, tempted to hide from reality just a little longer. My phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. "Olivia, please, I was out of my mind with stress. You know I didn't mean any of it. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it." I set the phone down without responding. How many times had this cycle repeated? Ryan's temper would explode, followed by profuse apologies, promises to change, maybe even flowers. Each time I'd convinced myself it was just stress, just a phase, just a momentary lapse in an otherwise good marriage. But was it really good? I forced myself to look back with clearer eyes as I showered and dressed in one of the few outfits Ryan had thrown into my suitcase. We'd met 14 years ago at a charity gala. I was there showcasing my illustrations for a children's hospital project. Ryan was representing his then successful tech company. He'd been charming, attentive, genuinely interested in my work. "These are extraordinary," he'd said, studying my drawings. "You have a rare gift." For someone who had grown up hearing that art was a hobby, not a career, Ryan's validation had been intoxicating. We were married within 2 years, settling into a beautiful house in Ridgemont Heights that stretched my savings, but that Ryan insisted we deserved. The first signs appeared subtly. Comments about my little drawings when speaking to his colleagues, suggestions that I focus on more commercial work rather than the children's books I loved, gentle but persistent pressure to consider a real job when his company went through its first rough patch. "You could do graphic design for corporate clients," he'd suggested. "That's where the money is." I'd compromised, taking on commercial work I didn't enjoy to help with expenses. Meanwhile, my children's book illustrations and personal projects were relegated to early mornings and late nights. Ryan called it being practical. Now I recognized it for what it was, the slow erosion of my identity. After checking out of the hotel, I drove to Café Luna, a quiet spot where I often sketched while enjoying their signature lavender lattes. The barista, Jen, greeted me with her usual smile. "The usual, Olivia?" she asked, already reaching for a mug. "And maybe something to eat," I added, realizing I hadn't had dinner the night before. While waiting for my order, I opened my email, this time reading every detail of the message about Aunt Eleanor's estate. The inheritance wasn't just money. There was a property, a 3-bedroom house overlooking Crescent Bay, and a collection of art and antiques currently in storage. The attorney handling the estate, Patricia Winters, had requested a meeting at my earliest convenience. I typed a quick response, asking for an appointment that afternoon if possible. Within minutes, she replied, 3 p.m. would work perfectly. The address was in Westlake, about 40 minutes away. As I sipped my coffee, my phone rang. Ryan again. "This time," I answered. "Thank God," he said. "Liv, I've been going crazy. Where are you? When are you coming home?" "I'm not," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "What do you mean you're not?" "You can't be serious." His tone shifted, that dangerous edge returning. "Where are you even staying? Who are you with?" The implication was clear, and so familiar. Whenever we argued, Ryan somehow twisted things to suggest I might be unfaithful. A projection, I now realized, of his own brief affair 3 years ago that I had forgiven too easily. "I'm alone, Ryan, and I need some time to think." "Think about what?" I said I was sorry. His voice rose and I could picture him pacing our kitchen, running a hand through his hair the way he did when agitated. "This is ridiculous. Just come home, and we can talk like adults." "Like adults?" I repeated, a humorless laugh escaping. Was throwing my clothes onto the lawn adult behavior? Was breaking our wedding gifts adult behavior? "You pushed me to that. You know how much pressure. I'm under with the company, and instead of supporting me, you suggest we sell our house? How could you be so selfish?" There it was, the familiar script. My fault. Always my fault. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted by the predictability of it all. "I need to go," I said quietly. "Olivia, don't you dare hang up on me. If you're not home by dinner, You'll what, Ryan?" I asked, my voice finally breaking. "Throw more of my things onto the lawn? Break more of our memories? Or maybe this time you'll follow through on those threats you think I don't notice when you're angry?" The silence that followed was loaded. We both knew he had crossed lines before, grabbing my wrist too tightly, standing over me during arguments, punching the wall beside my head once when I had suggested therapy. "I would never hurt you," he finally said, his voice smaller. "You know that." But I didn't know that anymore, and the realization terrified me. "I'll be in touch," I said, ending the call before he could respond. My hands were shaking as I set down my phone. Saying the truth out loud, even obliquely, made it impossible to ignore anymore. Our marriage wasn't just troubled, It was toxic, and perhaps even dangerous. By the time I arrived at Patricia Winter's office, I had called Zoe and left a message explaining the situation, researched extended stay hotels, and most importantly, contacted a locksmith to change the code on our home security system. If Ryan wanted to throw more of my belongings out, he'd have to break in to do it. The law offices of Winters and Associates occupied the top floor of a sleek building overlooking a small park. Patricia herself was nothing like I expected. Younger than me by a few years, with bright blue hair and a sleeve of colorful tattoos visible beneath her rolled-up shirt sleeves. "You must be Olivia," she said, greeting me with a warm handshake. "Eleanor told me so much about you." "She did?" I asked, following her into a conference room where files were already spread out on the table. "Oh, yes. Those 3 weeks you spent with her meant everything. She said you were the only one who saw her as a person, not a checkbook." I blinked back unexpected tears. I didn't even know she had money. She was family. Patricia smiled sadly. "That's exactly why you're sitting here today. Please have a seat. There's quite a bit to go through." As Patricia outlined the details of my inheritance, I struggled to comprehend its magnitude. In addition to the house and financial assets, Aunt Eleanor had left me her entire art collection, pieces she had acquired over decades that had significantly appreciated in value. There was also a letter, which Patricia handed to me in a sealed envelope. "She was very specific that you should read this privately," Patricia explained, standing. "I'll give you a few minutes." When she had left, I carefully opened the envelope, unfolding several pages of elegant handwriting. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, our time together has ended, but what I hope to give you is just beginning. Not just financial security, but freedom. The freedom I found too late in my own life. I recognized myself in you from the first moment you arrived in Zurich. The way you dimmed your light, made yourself smaller. I watched how you checked your phone constantly, apologizing to your husband for being away. Even though you were sitting with a dying woman, I saw the fading bruise on your wrist that you thought was hidden by your bracelet. I never married, dear one, because I saw what happened to my sister, your mother, when she tied herself to a man who needed to control everything and everyone around him. Your father was cut from the same cloth as your husband, charming in public, cruel in private. She escaped too late to truly rebuild, but you still have time. This money represents my life's work and freedom. Use it to find yours. The house in Crescent Bay was my secret sanctuary for years. No one knows about it except Patricia. It's yours now, a place to breathe, to think, to remember who you were before someone else started defining you. Be brave, my girl. Be braver than I was until it was almost too late. With all my love and faith in you, Eleanor, I pressed the letter to my chest, tears flowing freely now. Aunt Eleanor had seen everything in those 3 weeks, things I had been hiding, even from myself. She hadn't just left me money, she'd left me an escape route. When Patricia returned, I had composed myself enough to ask the practical questions. How soon could I access the funds? How long until the house would be ready? What about the art collection? "The house is ready now," Patricia said, sliding a key across the table. "Eleanor kept it fully maintained. As for the funds, I can have an initial amount transferred to a new account in your name by tomorrow. The rest might take a week or two as we finalize paperwork." "A new account?" I asked. Patricia nodded, her expression serious. "Eleanor was very specific about that. The inheritance goes to you and you alone, with no access for your husband. She also advised setting up the new account at a different bank than any you currently use with him. The intention behind these instructions was clear. Aunt Eleanor hadn't just been leaving me wealth. She'd been creating a pathway to independence. As I left Patricia's office with a folder of documents and the key to a house I'd never seen, I felt a strange mixture of grief and possibility. Aunt Eleanor had seen what I had refused to acknowledge, had prepared for a moment I hadn't been brave enough to create for myself. Now I had a choice to make. Return to the familiar cycle with Ryan, this time with financial leverage but the same emotional chains. Or step into the unknown future Aunt Eleanor had believed me capable of building. I got into my car and entered the address of the Crescent Bay house into my GPS. It was time to see what freedom looked like. The Crescent Bay house took my breath away. Perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, it was smaller than our Ridgemont Heights home, but infinitely more beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured the ocean view, and a wraparound deck seemed to suspend the living space between sea and sky. The furniture was minimal but exquisite, clearly chosen by someone with Aunt Eleanor's impeccable taste. I walked through each room slowly, running my fingers along surfaces, opening drawers, discovering the hidden details of my new sanctuary. In the primary bedroom, a large drafting table faced the ocean, complete with professional-grade art supplies. Eleanor had created a studio space specifically designed for illustration work. For the first time since being thrown out, I felt something. Other than shock or fear, a small spark of excitement. I could work here. I could breathe here. My phone interrupted the moment, buzzing persistently. Ryan again, but this time with a different approach. I spoke with the police. His text read, "If you don't return home immediately, I'll report our car as stolen." My heart raced. The SUV was in both our names, but Ryan had always considered it his car that he allowed me to use. Would the police actually get involved? Could I be arrested? The possibility, however remote, was terrifying. I called Patricia immediately, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. "Classic intimidation tactic," she said, her tone calm but firm. "He's bluffing. The vehicle is marital property and you have every right to drive it." But this is exactly why Eleanor was so careful with her arrangements. She paused, then added gently, "Olivia, this is often how it starts. Threats, financial control, isolation. Do you feel safe?" The question hung in the air. Did I? Ryan had never actually hit me, though there had been moments when I feared he might. The grabbing, the wall punching, the intimidation, were those not forms of abuse too? "I don't know," I finally admitted. "I don't think he would hurt me physically, but he's already hurting you," Patricia finished. "Listen, I wasn't just Eleanor's attorney. I was her friend, and I work with the Women's Safety Network. I've seen this pattern before." By the time we ended the call, Patricia had connected me with a legal advisor specializing in domestic cases and arranged for a security company to install a basic system at the Crescent Bay house the next day. "Just precautions," she assured me. "Eleanor would want you protected in every way possible." That evening, as I unpacked my meager belongings in the master bedroom, my phone chimed with an email notification. The first portion of my inheritance had been transferred to a new account at Coastal Federal Bank, $250,000 immediately available, with the remainder to follow. The figure seemed unreal. In one day, I had gone from frantically calculating whether I could afford an extended hotel stay to having more money than I'd ever controlled in my life. Another text from Ryan. "I've called your parents. They're worried sick. We all are. Please just come home so we can work this out." My stomach tightened. Of course he would involve my parents, the same parents who had advised me to be more supportive when I confided about Ryan's temper years ago. My father, like Ryan, had always been the dominant force in his marriage. My mother, like me, had learned to accommodate, to smooth things over, to blame herself. Sure enough, my phone rang moments later. My mother. "Olivia, what on earth is going on? Ryan says you've run off without explanation. He's beside himself." I took a deep breath. "He kicked me out, Mom. He threw my clothes onto the lawn during a rainstorm." "Well, what did you do to provoke him?" The question was so automatic, so expected that I almost laughed. "Nothing that would justify that behavior," I replied, my voice stronger than I expected. "And the fact that you immediately assume I must have done something wrong is part of the problem. Don't take that tone with me, young lady. Marriages have rough patches. Your father and I certainly did. You work through them, not run away." I closed my eyes, suddenly understanding so much about my own patterns. "I'm not running away, Mom. I'm removing myself from a situation that's become harmful." "Harmful? Don't be so dramatic. Ryan told us about the company struggles. He's under tremendous pressure, and instead of standing by him, you're making everything worse." The conversation continued in this vein for 20 more minutes, my mother defending Ryan, minimizing my concerns, urging me to go home where I belonged. When we finally hung up, I felt drained but oddly clearer. The conversation had only confirmed what I needed to do. I sent Ryan a brief text. "I am safe. I need space. Please don't contact my parents again. It's unfair to drag them into this. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." Then I blocked his number. The next morning, I woke to the sound of waves crashing against the cliff below. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, absorbing the unfamiliar peace. No need to tiptoe around Ryan's moods. No analyzing his expressions to gauge whether it was a good day or a bad day. No subtle tension in my shoulders, bracing for the next criticism. After breakfast on the deck, I sat at Eleanor's drafting table and opened my laptop. 3 illustration commissions had been neglected in the chaos of the past few days. With the ocean spread before me, I began to work, losing myself in the familiar comfort of creation. Hours later, a notification pulled me back to reality. An email from Ryan, sent to my work account which I hadn't thought to block. "I've frozen our joint checking and savings accounts. If you want access to your money, you'll need to come home and discuss this like adults." Panic flared briefly before I remembered my new financial reality. Still, I logged into our bank accounts to assess the damage. As threatened, both were frozen, including the account where my most recent illustration payments had been deposited. Nearly $4,000 of my earnings, now inaccessible. The control tactic was so transparent it almost seemed ridiculous now. A week ago, losing access to those funds would have been catastrophic. Rent, groceries, my car payment all would have been jeopardized. It would have forced me back home, exactly as Ryan intended. Today, it simply confirmed I'd made the right decision. The security company arrived mid-afternoon, 2 efficient technicians who installed smart locks, motion sensors, and cameras at key entry points. They explained the mobile app that would alert me to any disturbances and left their direct number, just in case. Just as they were finishing, Patricia called. "How are you settling in?" I updated her on Ryan's latest tactics, involving my parents freezing our accounts. "Classic escalation," she said. "Now that you're not responding as expected, he's amplifying the pressure. Are you still feeling okay with your decision?" "More than okay," I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "But I do need to get more of my things. Nearly everything I own is still in our house." There was a pause. "That complicates things. It's often during property retrieval that these situations become volatile." "I can't just abandon everything," I said. "My art supplies, my portfolio, family photos, important documents." "Of course not," Patricia agreed. "But we need to be strategic. I have some ideas, but first, have you spoken with a divorce attorney yet?" The word hung in the air between us. Divorce. Until that moment, I hadn't fully acknowledged that this separation was permanent, that there was no going back to my marriage. "No," I admitted. "Everything's happening so fast." "I understand. But given Ryan's behavior, we should get legal protection in place as soon as possible. I can recommend someone excellent, Andrea Levine. She specializes in high-conflict divorces and has experience with cases involving financial control and emotional abuse." By the time we ended the call, I had an appointment with Andrea for the following day and a growing list of immediate steps, changing passwords on all my accounts, gathering whatever important documents I had with me, making a comprehensive list of items still at the house. That evening, a knock at the door sent my heart racing. The security app showed a delivery person holding a large bouquet of flowers. I accepted them cautiously, bringing them to the kitchen counter before opening the card. "I'm sorry for everything. Please come home. I love you more than anything. Ryan." Classic Ryan. Grand gestures in place of actual change. In the past, flowers and tearful apologies had been enough to make me doubt myself, to wonder if I was overreacting, to give him one more chance. Now they seemed like props in a performance I'd seen too many times. I placed the bouquet outside on the deck, unwilling to have even their scent in my new space. As night fell, I sat on the deck wrapped in a blanket, watching the moonlight play across the water. My phone pinged with an email from Zoe, who had finally returned my message. "OMG Liv, just got back and heard your voicemail. What the hell? Are you okay? Where are you staying? Do you need me to come get you?" I knew Ryan was controlling, but this is next level. "Call me ASAP," I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support, and wrote back explaining my current situation, omitting the inheritance details for now, but assuring her I was safe. Just as I was about to head inside, another email arrived, this one from Ryan to my work account again. The subject line made my blood run cold. "Final warning." I hesitated before opening it, my finger hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it unread, to maintain the peace I'd begun to find, but I needed to know what I was dealing with. "Olivia, your behavior is becoming concerning to everyone who cares about you. First abandoning our home, now refusing to communicate. This isn't like you. I've spoken with Dr. Matthews, who agrees you may be having some kind of breakdown. If you don't come home by tomorrow evening, I'll have no choice but to take steps to get you the help you obviously need. I've always taken care of you, even when you couldn't see it. Don't force my hand. Ryan Dr. Matthews, Ryan's college friend who happened to be a psychiatrist." The implicit threat was clear. If I didn't comply, Ryan would try to suggest I was mentally unstable. My hands shook as I forwarded the email to Patricia and the lawyer she'd recommended. This wasn't just about frozen bank accounts anymore. Ryan was escalating to threats that could potentially affect my freedom, my reputation, my livelihood. For the first time since leaving, genuine fear gripped me. Not just anxiety or uncertainty, but cold, hard fear. Ryan wasn't just trying to pressure me to return. He was becoming dangerous in ways I hadn't anticipated. I double-checked the security system, locked every door and window, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. Tomorrow I would meet with the divorce attorney. Tomorrow I would make a plan to retrieve my belongings. Tomorrow I would start fighting back. But tonight, alone in a strange house with the weight of Ryan's threats hanging over me, I questioned everything. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was I truly in danger, or was I overreacting? Was I strong enough to face what was coming? As I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Aunt Eleanor's words from her letter echoed in my mind. "Be brave, my girl. Be braver than I was until it was almost too late." I would need every ounce of that bravery for what lay ahead. Andrea Levine's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, with original stained glass windows and modern security cameras. A fitting combination for a lawyer who specialized in helping clients leave difficult marriages safely. Andrea herself projected both warmth and formidable competence. In her early 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and penetrating eyes, she listened without interruption as I explained my situation, including Ryan's escalating threats and controlling behaviors. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "First, I want to commend you for leaving. That's often the hardest step. Now, let's discuss immediate protections before moving to longer-term strategy." She pulled out a legal pad. Based on what you've shared, particularly the threatening emails and financial manipulation, we have grounds for an emergency protective order. This would legally prevent Ryan from contacting you or coming near your residence. Is that really necessary? I asked, the reality of how bad things had become still difficult to fully accept. Andrea's expression softened. Olivia, threatening to have you committed because you left an unhealthy relationship is not normal marital conflict. It's coercive control, and it often escalates when the controlled partner asserts independence. She continued outlining immediate steps: filing for the protective order, sending formal notice to financial institutions about contested access to joint accounts, and preparing divorce papers that would include temporary financial support despite my newfound wealth. Why request support when I don't need it financially? I asked. Because this isn't just about money, Andrea explained. It's about establishing the pattern of financial control and emotional abuse. Every element we document now strengthens your position if he contests the divorce or retaliates further. By the time I left Andrea's office, a comprehensive plan was in motion. The protective order would be filed that afternoon, and a forensic financial specialist would begin tracking Ryan's movements in our joint accounts. Most importantly, we had scheduled a police-escorted visit to the house the following day to retrieve my essential belongings. Bring a detailed inventory and trusted friends, Andrea advised. Keep interaction with Ryan minimal and document everything. I'll arrange for the officers to meet you there at 10 a.m. That evening, I made my list, focusing on irreplaceable items, my professional portfolio, family photographs, important documents, and the custom art supplies I'd collected over years. I called Zoe, who immediately volunteered to help, and then, after hesitation, my younger sister, Mia. Unlike our mother, Mia had always been wary of Ryan. There's something about the way he looks at you when you're not watching, she'd said. Once, years ago, I had dismissed her concerns then, attributing them to her general distrust of men after her own difficult breakup. Of course I'll be there, Mia said now, no trace of I told you so in her voice. And Liv? I'm proud of you. The next morning dawned clear and bright, at odds with the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Zoe picked me up early, her normally bubbly personality subdued as she hugged me fiercely. Whatever happens, we've got your back, she promised. We met Mia at a coffee shop near my old neighborhood, reviewing the plan once more. Mia had brought reinforcements, her roommate Tara, who worked as a paralegal, and their friend Derek, a gentle giant who taught kindergarten but looked like he could bench press a car. Just in case, Mia said, squeezing my hand. At precisely 10 a.m., we pulled up behind a police cruiser in front of the house I had shared with Ryan for nearly a decade. Officer Ramirez and her partner, Officer Chen, greeted us professionally, explaining they would remain present throughout to keep the peace, but could not assist with moving items. Standard procedure in these situations, Officer Ramirez explained. We're just here to make sure everyone stays calm and follows the court order. Ryan's car was in the driveway, confirming he was home despite the workday. My hands trembled slightly as Officer Chen rang the doorbell, the protective order visible in his hand. The door opened to reveal Ryan, unshaven, wearing the same Northwestern university sweatshirt he'd had for years, looking simultaneously angry and bewildered. "What is this?" he demanded, glaring at the officers before his eyes landed on me. His expression shifted to relief. "Olivia, thank God. I've been so worried." "Officer," Chen intervened before he could say more. "Mr. Mercer, this is a court-ordered retrieval of personal property. You've been served with a protective order prohibiting contact with Mrs. Mercer. Please step aside and remain at least 10 feet from her at all times." The shock on Ryan's face as he scanned the document would have been satisfying under different circumstances. Instead, it just made me sad. Sad for the relationship I had thought we had. Sad for the man I had once loved enough to marry. "This is ridiculous," Ryan sputtered, looking past the officer directly at me. "A protective order? What lies have you been telling, Olivia?" "Mr. Mercer," Officer Ramirez said firmly, "I need to remind you that antagonizing Mrs. Mercer violates the order you're currently holding. Please cooperate or we'll have to take further action." Ryan stepped back, his face flushing with anger, but he remained silent as our group entered the house. Following Andrea's advice, Zoe recorded a video walkthrough documenting the condition of the house and the items I intended to take, while Mia and Tara helped me gather my belongings according to the itemized list. The silence was tense as we worked, Ryan watching from the kitchen with barely contained fury. I focused on my tasks, avoiding eye contact, grateful for the protective buffer of friends and officers. In my home office, I discovered my worst fear confirmed. My portfolio case was open, key pieces missing. My desk had been ransacked, hard, drives removed from their usual storage. "He's taken my work," I said to Zoe, panic rising. "My original illustrations, my backup drives." Officer Ramirez approached. "We can document the missing items, but removal of shared property is a civil matter unless you can prove exclusive ownership." Zoe continued filming as I explained each missing item and its significance to my career. Meanwhile, Derek began checking other hiding spots: the attic, storage closets, the garage. He returned 20 minutes later with a grim expression, but carrying my portfolio case and a box of hard drives. "Found these in the garage, hidden under some old camping equipment," he said quietly. "Everything seems intact, but you should check." Relief washed over me as I confirmed my work was all there. Ryan had hidden, not destroyed, my professional life's blood, perhaps intending to use it as leverage to force me back home. As we continued packing my belongings, Ryan finally broke his silence. "You know this is temporary, right?" he said, his voice eerily calm. "This little independence fantasy of yours. Where will you go when the money runs out? Who's going to take care of you?" I continued carefully wrapping a framed photograph of my grandparents, not acknowledging his words. "I built everything we have," he continued, growing agitated at my non-response. "Everything. That car you drove away in, I paid for it. This house, my career made it possible. Your little drawing, hobby, I subsidized it for years." Officer Chen stepped closer to Ryan. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice and step back." Ryan ignored him, his focus entirely on me. "Who put these ideas in your head, Olivia? Was it that man? The one who called about the commission last month. Are you leaving me for him?" The accusation was so absurd it nearly made me laugh. The audience man had been a children's book publisher interested in my work. Mia stepped between us. "That's enough, Ryan. You heard the officer." Ryan's expression darkened. "Stay out of this. Your sister's been poisoning your mind against me for years. Is that what this is about? Did she convince you I'm some kind of monster?" Before Mia could respond, I turned to face Ryan directly for the first time. "No one had to convince me of anything. Your behavior speaks for itself." His face contorted with rage. "My behavior? You ungrateful—" "Mr. Mercer." Officer Ramirez's sharp tone cut through his building tirade. "One more outburst and you will be removed from the premises during this process. Is that clear?" Ryan fell silent, but the hatred in his eyes sent a chill down my spine. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity that I had never really known this man, or perhaps had known but refused to see. Within an hour, we had gathered everything on my list that could be found. Some items remained mysteriously missing: my passport, birth certificate, the jewelry I had inherited from my grandmother. But Andrea had warned me this might happen. As we prepared to leave, Ryan made one final attempt. "Olivia," he said, his voice suddenly gentle, tears welling in his eyes. "Please don't do this to us. Whatever I did wrong, I can fix it. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything." The dramatic shift was familiar. Rage to remorse in an instant. a tactic that had kept me emotionally tethered for years. This time, seeing it from outside our usual pattern, its manipulation was transparent. "Goodbye, Ryan," I said softly, walking past him toward the door. "This isn't over," he called after me, the gentle facade instantly dropping. "You think you can just walk away? After everything I've done for you? I will fight you on every single thing. By the time I'm finished, you'll have nothing." I paused in the doorway, turning to look at our home, the tasteful furnishings chosen to impress his colleagues, the muted colors he had insisted upon, the conspicuous absence of my artwork on any wall. "I already have everything I need," I replied, stepping into the sunlight. Back at Crescent Bay, as we unloaded my reclaimed possessions, a text arrived from Andrea. "Protective order successfully filed and activated. He's been officially served. Any contact is now a legal violation." That evening, after my friends had gone, I sat at Eleanor's drafting table, now my drafting table, and opened my recovered portfolio. Leafing through years of work, I recognized how much of myself I had compressed to fit into the narrow space Ryan had allocated for my dreams. I reached for a fresh sheet of paper and began to sketch, not for a client or project, but for myself. The image that emerged was a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, arms outstretched, preparing not to fall, but to fly. For the first time in years, I was drawing my own story. 3 months after leaving Ryan, I stood in the gallery space that had once been Aunt Eleanor's storage unit, surrounded by her art collection, now my art collection. Patricia had helped me convert the industrial space into a small but elegant gallery, with track lighting highlighting each carefully arranged piece. "What do you think?" asked Layla, the art consultant I'd hired to help curate the collection. "The Rothko reproduction works beautifully in this corner, don't you think?" I nodded, still sometimes overwhelmed by the reality of my new life. In 12 weeks, I had transformed from a woman who needed permission to buy art supplies into someone who owned a collection worth more than our former house in Ridgemont Heights. The divorce proceedings had begun, with Ryan fighting every step, as he'd promised. He had hired an aggressive attorney known for scorched earth tactics, demanding half of my inheritance despite Patricia's careful legal protections. Marital assets include inheritances received during the marriage, his lawyer had argued in our first mediation session. Andrea had simply smiled. Not when they're held in a trust explicitly designated for the sole benefit of one spouse, with provisions triggered by documented financial abuse. We have evidence of Mr. Mercer's systematic control of Mrs. Mercer's earnings, including diversion of her funds to accounts she couldn't access. The look on Ryan's face when Andrea presented bank records showing how he had routinely transferred my illustration payments into his personal accounts was something I wouldn't soon forget. But more satisfying than any legal victory was the gradual reclamation of myself. Each day brought small revelations. I preferred spicy food, which Ryan had always vetoed. I enjoyed early mornings rather than late nights. I loved bold colors and patterns, not the muted tones Ryan had insisted were tasteful. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Just checking the time for tonight?" Tonight, the small gallery opening. I'd organized to showcase not Eleanor's collection, but my own work. In the month since leaving, I had created more art than in the previous 3 years combined, finally giving form to the ideas that had been suppressed for so long. The series titled Emergence chronicled a woman's journey from confinement to freedom through stylized illustrations combining elements of children's book art with more abstract emotional expressions. It wasn't commercially calculated, as Ryan would have insisted, but deeply personal. To my shock, when I'd shown the preliminary sketches to a publisher I'd worked with previously, she had immediately offered a book deal. Not for a children's book, but for an illustrated memoir about emotional recovery. 7 o'clock, I texted back to Mia. Nervous but excited. I returned home to prepare, still sometimes caught off guard by the beauty of the Crescent Bay house. I had gradually made it mine, replacing some furniture, adding splashes of color, and converting the second bedroom into a proper studio with large tables and organized supplies. As I dressed for the evening, I studied my reflection, not just my appearance, but the woman I was becoming. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for years had eased. The habit of mentally rehearsing conversations to avoid triggering Ryan's anger was fading. The reflexive self-doubt when making even minor decisions was being replaced by a growing confidence. I chose a crimson dress that Ryan would have called attention-seeking and jewelry he would have deemed excessive. Tonight wasn't about him, but it was about shedding the constraints he had placed on me for so long. The gallery was already buzzing when I arrived. Patricia was deep in conversation with Andrea near a large mixed-media piece, depicting a woman dissolving the bars of a golden cage. Zoe was enthusiastically explaining another artwork to her boyfriend. My sister Mia stood with our mother, whose presence was unexpected. We had spoken only a few times since I left Ryan, each conversation strained. She had maintained that I was being hasty and dramatic, but something about seeing my father's controlling behavior through the lens of my own marriage had made it impossible to accept her enabling perspectives any longer. "Mom," I said cautiously, approaching them. "I didn't know you were coming." She looked uncomfortable but determined. Mia insisted. She thought I should see your work. I braced for criticism, that the illustrations were too dark, too revealing, too personal for public consumption. Instead, my mother surprised me. "It's us, isn't it?" she asked quietly, gesturing to a piece showing two women, one older, one younger, standing on opposite sides of a wide river. "That's how you see us now." The insight startled me. "Yes," I admitted, "but notice the bridge being built from both sides?" She studied the illustration more carefully, noting the small details, how both figures were extending materials across the gap, how the waters below were turbulent but navigable. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "About your father, about your marriage, about mine." Before she could continue, the gallery owner called for everyone's attention, introducing me as the artist. Standing before the gathered group of friends, professional contacts, and art enthusiasts, I felt a momentary flutter of the old anxiety, the fear of taking up space, of being seen, of inviting judgment. I took a deep breath. "Thank you all for coming tonight." This collection, Emergence, represents a journey that many might recognize, from life on others' terms to life on one's own. Each piece corresponds to a chapter in the accompanying memoir, which will be published next spring. As I spoke about the creative process and the personal transformation that had inspired it, I noticed a figure at the back of the gallery. Ryan. My words faltered momentarily as our eyes met. Despite the protective order, he had found a way to insert himself into this moment. Andrea noticed immediately, discreetly signaling to the security guard she had insisted we hire for the event. Before any confrontation could occur, Ryan turned and walked out, having achieved his goal of unsettling me. I forced myself to continue, determined not to let his intrusion derail a night that represented so much more than he could ever understand. When the formal presentation ended and guests began circulating again, Patricia approached. "Are you okay?" she asked. "We can file a violation report." I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? The sight of Ryan had triggered a physical response, racing heart, tight chest, but not the paralyzing fear that once would have accompanied it. "Actually, yes," I said, realizing it was true. He wanted to shake me to prove he still has power, but he doesn't. Not anymore. Later that evening, as the event wound down, the gallery owner approached with exciting news. 6 pieces had sold, including the most personal one depicting a woman standing at crossroads. "The buyer wants to remain anonymous," she explained, "but they've paid significantly above the asking price and requested a meeting to commission more work." The night's success both personal and professional, felt like a vindication, not just of my art, but of the difficult choice I had made to leave a marriage that had slowly been suffocating me. As guests departed, my mother lingered, clearly wanting to speak privately. We found a quiet corner, both nervous about this fragile, new attempt at honest communication. "Your father moved out last week," she said abruptly. I asked him to leave. The revelation stunned me. My parents had been married for 40 years, their dynamic as fixed and familiar as constellations. "What happened?" I managed to ask. She looked at my artwork, the series of illustrations showing a woman slowly reclaiming her colors, her shape, her voice. "You happened," she said simply. "Watching you stand up for yourself, it made me question why I never did. Why I taught you to accommodate, to shrink, to endure." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Olivia. I gave you the wrong lessons." We embraced, both crying for mistakes made and years lost, but also for the possibility of something new between us, something healthier and more honest. The following week brought another development in the divorce proceedings. Ryan's lawyer requested an emergency hearing, claiming they had evidence that I had been hiding assets before filing for divorce. Andrea was unconcerned. "It's a fishing expedition. They're hoping to find something to leverage for a better settlement." Still, sitting in the courtroom while Ryan's attorney presented bank statements showing transfers to my new accounts was nerve-wracking. The judge, no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened impassively before turning to Andrea. "These transfers appear to have occurred after a documented incident of domestic ejection," Andrea explained calmly. "Ms. Mercer was establishing financial independence after being forcibly removed from her home and having joint accounts frozen by Mr. Mercer. She then presented the full documentation of Eleanor's trust, the timing of the inheritance, and Ryan's increasingly threatening emails. The judge's expression remained neutral, but her questions became increasingly pointed as she addressed Ryan's attorney. "Are you contesting that Mr. Mercer ejected Ms. Mercer from their shared home during inclement weather? Or that he subsequently froze joint financial accounts containing her earned income? Or that he sent emails threatening to have her involuntarily committed if she didn't return home?" Ryan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My client was under extreme stress due to business difficulties. He regrets his actions and has been seeking counseling to address these issues. The judge's skepticism was palpable. Counseling is commendable, but doesn't negate the documented pattern of financial control and emotional abuse. Motion denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering an expedited schedule for final divorce proceedings. As we left the courthouse, Ryan caught up to us in the parking lot, ignoring the protective order yet again. "This isn't over, Olivia," he said, his voice low but intense. "You think you've won because of your rich aunt's money? You're nothing without me. Nothing. And soon everyone will know it." Before Andrea could intervene, I turned to face him directly. "No, Ryan, it is over. And I'm not nothing, I never was. The only person who thought so was you." Security personnel approached, and Ryan retreated, but not before I glimpsed something I had never seen before in his expression. Fear. Not of legal consequences, but of irrelevance. His control over me had been his power, and without it, he was the one who felt diminished. 6 months to the day after Ryan had thrown my suitcase onto our rain-soaked lawn, our divorce was finalized. The settlement was straightforward. Ryan kept the Ridgemont Heights house, now underwater on its mortgage due to his financial mismanagement, and his struggling business. I kept my inheritance, my art, and most importantly, my freedom. To mark the occasion, I didn't celebrate with champagne or parties. Instead, I drove to the cliffside path near my home, now truly my home, and walked along the edge as sunset painted the sky in spectacular colors that no designer would ever call tasteful. My phone pinged with a message from Patricia. Eleanor would be proud. I smiled, Imagining my aunt, a woman who had found her own freedom late in life but had made the most of it, watching over me. Her final gift hadn't just been financial security. It had been the chance to discover who I really was when not defined by someone else's limitations. As darkness fell, I made my way back to the house, its windows glowing warmly against the night. Inside, my latest project waited on the drafting table, illustrations for a children's book about courage, commissioned by a major publisher who had seen my gallery show. The story featured a young girl who discovers a magic paintbrush that reveals the true nature of things, showing the beautiful colors within seemingly ordinary objects and the shadows lurking in deceptively golden cages. It was whimsical on the surface but carried deeper messages about trust, perception, and the courage to see clearly. I added a final touch to the main character's expression, a mixture of wonder and determination that felt exactly right. This was what freedom looked like, the ability to create without constraint, to tell stories that might help others see their own situations more clearly, to finally live truthfully. Ryan had kicked me out believing he was punishing me, never imagining he was actually setting me free. His temper had been the crack that broke open the facade of our marriage, allowing me to escape its confines. And Aunt Eleanor's inheritance, both financial and spiritual, had given me the resources to build something new from the pieces. Standing in my seaside studio, surrounded by my work and wrapped in the peace of genuine independence, I realized that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can be unexpected doorways to our best ones, if we have the courage to step through them. 5. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.